Welcome back, and in this lesson I want to talk about S3 object lock. Now this is something which is really important to understand for the SysOps certification, but equally if you're developing applications running in AWS or architecting solutions for AWS, you also need to have an awareness. Now we've got a fair amount to cover, so let's jump in and get started. S3 object lock is actually a group of related features which I'll talk about in this lesson, but it's something that you enable on new S3 buckets. If you want to turn on object lock for existing buckets, then you need to contact AWS support, and this is probably going to change over time, but at the time of creating this lesson, this is the current situation. Now when you create a bucket with object lock enabled, versioning is also enabled on that bucket. Once you create a bucket with object lock and enable it, you cannot disable object lock or suspend versioning on that bucket. Object lock implements a write once, read many architecture, and this is known as worm. It means that you can set it so that object versions once created can't be overwritten or deleted. And just to reiterate, since this is a pretty important point, the feature requires versioning to be enabled on a bucket, and because of this, it's actually individual object versions which are locked. Now when we talk about object lock, there are actually two ways it manages object retention: retention periods and legal holds. An object version can have both of these, one or the other, or none of them, and it's really important for the exam and for the real world to think of these as two different things. So S3 object lock retention and S3 object lock legal hold. Now just like with bucket default encryption settings, these can be defined on individual object versions, or you can define bucket defaults for all of the object lock features. Now this is just the feature at a high level. Next, I want to quickly step through the key points of the different retention methods, so retention period and legal hold, and we're going to start with retention period. With the retention period style of object locking, when you create the object lock, you specify a retention period in days and/or years. 1 year means the retention period will end 1 year from when it's applied. Now there are two modes of retention period lock which you can apply, and it's really important that you understand how these work and the differences between the two. One, because it matters for the exam, and two, because if you get it wrong, it will cause a world of pain. The first mode is compliance mode. If you set a retention period on an object using compliance mode, it means that an object version cannot be deleted or overwritten for the duration of the retention period. But it also means that the retention period itself cannot be reduced and the retention mode cannot be adjusted during the retention period. So no changes at all to the object version or retention period settings, and this even includes the account root user. So no identity in the account can make any changes to object versions, delete object versions, or change the retention settings until the retention period expires. So this is serious business. This is the most strict form of object lock. Don't set this unless you really want that object version to stay around in its current form until the retention period expires. Now you'd use this mode, as the name suggests, for compliance reasons. An example of this might be medical or financial data. If you have compliance laws stating that you have to keep data, for example, for 3 years with no exceptions, then this is the mode that you set. Now a less strict version of this is governance mode. With this mode, you still set a retention period, and while active, the object version cannot be deleted or changed in any way, but you can grant special permissions to allow these to be changed. So if you want a specific group of identities to be able to change settings and object versions, then you can provide them with the permission S3:bypass governance retention. And as long as they have that permission and they provide a header along with their request, which is x-amz-bypass-governance-retention : true, then they can override the governance mode of retention. Now, an important point to understand is this last header, so x-amz- and then all the rest. This is actually the default for the console UI. And so using the console UI, if you have the S3: bypass governance retention, you will be able to make changes to governance mode retention locks. So governance mode is useful for a few things. 1, if you want to prevent accidental deletion. 2, if you have process reasons or governance reasons to keep object versions. Or lastly, you might use it as a test of settings before picking the compliance mode. So that's governance mode. These are both modes that can be used when using the retention period feature of S3 object locking. So please make sure you understand how they both work and the differences between the two before we finish with this lesson. It's really, really critical that you understand. Now, the last overview that I want to give is S3 object lock legal hold. With this type, you don't actually set a retention period at all. Instead, for an object version, you set legal hold to be on or off. To repeat, there's no concept of retention. This is a binary. It's either on or off. While legal hold is enabled on an object version, you can't delete or overwrite that specific object version. An extra permission is required, which is S3:put object legal hold, and this is required if you want to add or remove the legal hold feature. And this type of object locking can be used to prevent accidental deletions of object versions or for actual legal situations when you need to flag specific object versions as critical for a given case or a project. Now at this point, let's take a moment to summarise and look visually at how all of these different features work. Let's start with legal hold. We start with a normal object and we upload it to a bucket with the setting legal hold status to on, and this means that the object version is locked until the legal hold is removed. In this state, the object version can't be deleted or changed, but you can set the legal hold status to off, at which point normal permissions apply and the object version can be deleted or replaced as required. It's a binary, it's either on or off, and there isn't the concept of a retention period. Next, we have the S3 object locks that use the retention period architecture. First, we have governance. So we put an object into a bucket with the lock configuration of governance and specify a retention period. This creates a locked object version for a given number of days or years. And while it's in this state, it cannot be deleted or updated. With governance mode, this can be bypassed if you have the permissions and specify the correct header. And once again, this header is the default in the console, so you can adjust or remove the object lock or delete or replace the object version. So the important thing to realize here is while an object is locked for a given retention period using the governance mode, you can't make any changes to object versions or delete them, but you can be provided with the S3:bypass governance retention permission, and as long as you have that and specify the x-amz-bypass-governance-retention:true header, then you can override the governance mode object lock during the retention period. Then lastly, we have compliance, which is the same architecture. We upload an object, we specify compliance mode together with the retention period, and this creates an object version which is locked for a certain period in days and years. The difference though is that this can't be changed. An object version can't be deleted or updated, the retention period cannot be shortened, the compliance model can't be changed to something else, even by the account root user. This is permanent. Only once the retention period expires can the object version or the retention settings be updated. And for all of these, they can be set on object versions or bucket defaults can be defined. And that's the architecture of S3 Object Lock. It's critical that you understand it, so if it takes a few watches of this lesson, then that's okay. Make sure you understand it in detail, including how each type differs from the others. And remember, they can be used in conjunction with each other, so the effects can overlap. You might use legal hold together with either governance or compliance, and if you do, then the effects of this could overlap, so you need to understand all of this in detail. But at this point, that's everything I wanted to cover in this lesson, so go ahead and complete the video, and when you're ready, I look forward to you joining me in the next.